There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there?
This video was made possible due to those who support me on Patreon. I'd like to give a big shout out to patrons Christopher Spirit B, Conrad Truitt, Dan Ray, Eric Navarro, Flake, Frame by Frame, Joseph Abrams, Kristen Bennett, Kyle Kramer, Majin Wiebe, Mariah, Matthew Gay, Sophia Narwitz, and Stephen Dillon. Thank you all for your support. Hello those new to my channel and returning Macabros, and welcome to my latest recurring series entitled The Craft Of, which will serve as a crash course on traditional 3-act structure, which is the script structure that the vast majority of Hollywood films, released over the last god knows how many decades, have utilized. If you haven't checked out the previous entries of this series, I would recommend doing so, as I will be building off each entry as we continue. Keep in mind that there may also be spoilers for not only the films I will be discussing in this episode, but the films I discussed in those episodes, so make sure to check the description so you don't get any of them spoiled for you. Before we get to the video, a quick word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by what is perhaps the greatest game of all time, rivaling that of Ocarina of Time and The Simpsons Wrestling. That's right, you turn-based MMORPG loving degenerates, Raid Shadow Legends. Back in 5th grade, while brushing up on my Norse mythology, as all 11-year-olds do, while all my friends were simping for lame light elves, I was always drawn to the dark variety. Give me cutthroat assassins and ruthless warlocks any day. Centuries ago, all elves used to live in harmony. That was until Dark Lord Sarath tempted some away from the light, splitting them into two factions, the High Elves and the Dark Elves. War broke out and the High Elves were victorious, for now, but the battle still rages on for who will reign supreme over the land. Check out my girl Sniper, who will haunt your enemies' daydreams. Nothing gets me jazzed more than eviscerating entire dungeons with her bow skills, or taking on other players in the PvP arena and robbing them of their smiles and naive optimism. Raid is offering you saucy Macabros access to free epic champion Tyrell. Oh, wait, no, not him. Tyrell. 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard, coming to a $30 value. But this offer is only available for any and all new players for the next 30 days. So make sure you click on the link in the description or scan my QR code so you can redeem your tasty rewards. And now, back to the video. Today, the series finally comes to an end as we discuss the 5th and final of the 5 major plot points, the climax. Simply put, the climax is when your protagonist makes their final do-or-die decision, confronts the antagonist head-on, and brings about a resolution to the story's main conflict once and for all. It should go without saying that of the 5 main plot points, the climax is the most blatantly clear. To use some of the examples I have discussed throughout this series, in Dodgeball, Pierre decides to risk it all and join his average Joe teammates in the Dodgeball Tournament Championship. In Doubt, Sister Aloysius, with no avenues left to expunge suspected child molester Father Flynn, makes a final do-or-die gambit to make him leave the parish. In The Matrix, Neo and Trinity risk everything to save Morpheus from Agent Smith, with the fate of the entire city of Zion on the line. In Oldboy, Ode-Su, upon learning the truth behind his 15-year imprisonment, finally confronts his captor, Woo Jin Lee, to put an end to their feud once and for all. In each of these cases, the protagonist and the antagonist square off in the film's most pressing moment of conflict. Perhaps one of the most famous examples of a film's climax being this sort of mega showdown is James Cameron's 1986 Aliens. Following her harrowing survival of the events on the Nostromo, in which a lone xenomorph slaughtered her entire crew, Ellen Ripley is awoken after 57 years in stasis, only to find herself squaring off with a slew of new threats, who have massacred an entire planetary colony, as she seeks to protect Newt, the sole survivor of said massacre. The film's climax sees Ripley separated from Newt and making her final do-or-die decision to rescue her, facing off against the alien queen and jettisoning her out of the ship's airlock. Pretty obvious and clear in this case, right? Our protagonist makes a final do-or-die decision, which leads to them facing off against their greatest threat so far. Something to note is that the climax begins when your protagonist makes their final do-or-die decision and lasts until the story's main conflict is resolved. Thus, how long it takes to get there may vary greatly. In the case of Aliens, Oldboy, and The Matrix, the entire final act is basically one big climax, consisting of multiple scenes and/or sequences, whereas the the climax of Doubt, Die Hard, and Unforgiven, is a single scene and may only be 5 to 10 minutes long. Again, both are equally as valid, and it all depends on the circumstances of your story. However, that doesn't mean that all climaxes have to be a big, explosive, action-packed debacle. 2016's Manchester by the Sea tells the story of Lee Chandler. Following a tragic accident that led to the death of his 3 children, Lee moves to the city of Boston, drowning his sorrows with alcohol, condemning himself to a life of self-imposed punishment. But when his older brother Joe passes away, Lee must return to his former home to look after his nephew Patrick. Throughout the film, we the audience hope Lee will be able to overcome his trauma and become Patrick's guardian. But sadly, in the film's climax, Lee tells Patrick that their family friend George and his wife will be adopting him, lamenting that he simply cannot overcome his pain. It may seem strange to identify the film's climax as such a simple and understated scene, and yet it perfectly fits the criteria. 1, it is a face-off between the protagonist and antagonist. It may seem odd to identify Patrick as the quote-unquote antagonist of the story, but when it comes to storytelling, the antagonist is not necessarily the bad guy, rather the character whose goal is in direct opposition to the protagonist's. Lee returns to his former home to try and settle things as quickly as possible, but Patrick is the wrench thrown into the equation. Despite his insistence that he is fine, it is clear that Patrick truly needs Lee to be there for him. Thus, in this case, Patrick is the force standing directly in the way of Lee's goal, at least initially. And 2, the final conflict is resolved. While Lee considers returning to Manchester by the Sea to take care of Patrick, after a chance meeting with his ex-wife, Lee falls into a spiral and relents that, simply put, he can't beat it. In the end, Lee returns to Boston, but with hope that eventually he will one day overcome his trauma. So as you can see, this 2.5-minute scene, a quiet conversation at a dinner table, is still the climax of the story, where the protagonist makes their final do-or-die decision and the main conflict of the film is resolved one way or the other. Now, in the previous episodes, I usually offer a third example that denotes some sort of alternative archetype of each plot beat. But considering this is the last entry in this series, I figured I would use a case to show just how creative you can get with your writing even when you are using 3-act story structure. It also gives me a chance to promote one of the most underrated films of the last 20 years, 2007's Michael Clayton. The film tells the story of course, Michael Clayton, a fixer at a big-time New York law firm, who uses his skill set to get its clients out of trouble and clean up their messes. He is, as he puts it, a janitor of sorts. The firm is currently representing agricultural conglomerate U-North, who are being sued after one of their products, a carcinogenic weed killer, results in 468 deaths. The firm is nearing a settlement with the families of the victims. However, the film kicks off when Michael's friend Arthur, one of the firm's most prolific attorneys, suffers a manic episode and plans to release a memo proving that U-North knew about the danger the weed killer posed. Michael is dispatched to get Arthur under control so as not to put the pending settlement at risk. The film's main conflict being Michael's internal struggle over either betraying Arthur or doing his job, even if that means protecting a company that knowingly let hundreds of innocent people die. After Michael fails to keep Arthur under control, U-North Chief Counsel Karen Crowder, one of the most unassumingly horrifying villains of recent memory, has Arthur killed. Upon learning of Arthur's murder, Michael is faced with a final choice: destroy the incriminating evidence against U-North, thus ensuring a very lucrative future for himself, or expose them. In the film's climax, Michael confronts Karen and demands $10 million to keep the memo under wraps. We, the audience, are despaired to see Michael forgo his chance to do right by Arthur for a hefty payday. But after Karen agrees to the bribe, Michael reveals he was wearing a wire the entire time. Michael exits as the evidence of U-North's cover-up is exposed, and Karen is arrested for the murder of Arthur. It isn't a big, explosive, action-fueled showdown, nor is it a quiet, somber moment. It's somewhere in between, but no less riveting. A final checkmate move, destroying both U-North and his own law firm, all to do right by his friend. An immeasurably satisfying finale. And it still finds a way to add a creative bait-and-switch finale. Just going to show the idea that 3-act structure is somehow limiting is total bullshit, and no matter what, a talented writer can always find a way to deliver something special. And that will be it, folks. Thank you for your support, and to those who have been following this series from the beginning. Apologies it took so long to complete, but if you were just finding this series now, you most likely have been able to watch the entire thing from start to finish. But a special thanks to those who have been waiting patiently for me to get it together and put this baby to bed. Hopefully you find it educational and rewarding. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and share, and I'll see you next time.